the big one today, Ford, they
That's right.
promised to reduce salaried worker expenses by 10%. That means more than 2,500 workers could be let go. Ford announced the cuts alongside a $3 billion quarterly loss. Some analysts believe today's job numbers could actually prompt the Fed to cut rates again and bring them to lows not seen since the 1950s. But I do have to point out, though, since we did come off of our lows from earlier, our highs from earlier in the session, Tony, that part of the reason we're coming down now is because of GM and their earnings. The company said it lost $2.5 billion last quarter and says it estimates it has just enough money to operate its business for the rest of the year. Taking a look at GM right now, it has continued to slide since they reopened here, off 13% right now is where GM is. So it is really feeling the pinch.
Hang on a second. What were what's that number again? And what is GM saying in response to that in terms of how much cash on hand it has to operate here?
This is really huge. GM is saying that they lost $2.5 billion last quarter and that they have just enough money to operate their businesses for the rest of the year. So dire straits for sure in GM. And it just goes to show you why the big three automakers are in Washington trying to talk to Nancy Pelosi, trying to see if they can get any more help because they are in dire straits.
Okay. All right, we need more on this. All right, Stephanie, appreciate it. Thank you. You know, the economy obviously on a collision course with the car industry, particularly telling today. Ford, General Motors, Chrysler fighting to survive. Auto expert Lauren Fix is joining me now from Las Vegas. And Lauren, we're gonna talk here in just a moment, but I want to bring in Brooke Baldwin. She's at a GM plant in Warren, Michigan. And if you would, Brooke, go through these numbers, this reporting on third quarter. We would like to say earnings, but we know that's not the case. But take it away and share with us your reporting.
Yeah, we'll call them third quarter losses, Tony. These numbers just crossing the CNN desk. I think I just heard Stephanie Elam sort of give you a little sneak peek here. The net loss in the third quarter, Tony, $2.5 billion. We are being told that number is worse than expected. Apparently, in the third quarter, GM burned through $7 billion in cash. Apparently, GM is taking, quote-unquote, steps to reduce employment costs. They're not explaining what that exactly means. They're taking steps to reduce the costs, but they still need help from the federal government. So those are just the latest numbers we have now from GM, officially from me to you.
Okay, all right. And, Brooke, if you would, stand by. I know you've got some questions for Lauren. Let's bring in Lauren Fix. And, Lauren, will you put some perspective on these numbers here? The GM numbers first, and then, if you would, dovetail into the Ford numbers. What does this mean that we only have enough money here at GM to operate through the end of the year? That sounds pretty dire.
It does sound pretty dire. What's interesting is if you look at the world as a whole, sales have been well taken care of for GM and Ford in Europe, but here in the States, we have just been suffering horribly. And unfortunately, when people have job layoffs, and Ford's talking about 2,300 people being laid off, that's a lot of people without jobs that aren't buying cars. It affects the economy as a whole. The economy's not doing great. So, I mean, what GM and Ford are going to have to do is they're going to have to get a loan of some form. I know that yesterday on a closed-door meeting that the three major automakers have met with Pelosi and Reid, and they're asking for a $25 billion low-interest bridge loan. We don't know anything more than that. And
wait. All right, Lauren, let me break this out a little bit. Funds have been provided. Where did those funds? There was another $25 million, an initial $25 billion. Where did that come from? Was that the Energy Department?
That was through an energy bill that passed in September, and that was divided amongst the three automakers. I don't think they've received those loans yet.
Okay.
So when the cash hasn't come in, and even though they're promised these loans, these people are operating at a loss, and a huge loss. We're not talking like a few $1,000s. We're talking right now, we're talking about a $3 billion operating loss. That's really serious. And if they don't get these loans or find ways to sell off portions of their company or cut expenses, it's going to be pretty serious. And we're looking at right now over 2,000 dealers across the U.S. that potentially could go out of business. We've already lost some of our biggest dealers. And it's really going to affect everybody.
Well, wait a minute. So now I'm the president-elect. I'm the president-elect. And is it time for me to call a meeting of the CEOs of the big three automakers and sit across the table from them? And Lauren Fix, I'm putting you in that meeting, and I ask as president-elect, what do we need to do to stop these job losses? Are you coming back to me as the auto execs and saying we need cash, we need it now because our cash burn is killing us right now?
Right, but it has to be both sides. We have to say we need a bridge loan to get this sorted out, and they're looking at $25 billion. And this is Mullally, Nardelli. You know, these are big players. And on the other side, what they need to do is cut their capital expenses. And I have to admit, as a journalist, and I'll probably get yelled at for this, we go to these pretty lavish events because they want us to be talking nicely about their vehicles. But on the other hand, there's a lot of middle management that'll need to be cut, a lot of operating costs, a lot of advertising. And that affects, again, not just the auto manufacturers, but all those little companies that supply, because one job affects 9 other jobs out there, from marketing, event services, advertising companies. I mean, think about all the other people that are affected. So this really is affecting our economy in a very negative way. We have to come up with a solution. And I may not be the wisest, economist.
Oh yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Don't even go down that road. Let's bring in Brooke Baldwin again, because Brooke, I know you have a couple of questions for Lauren.
My question, I think you touched on it, Lauren, a little bit. We talk about that first $25 billion loan package that the president's already passed, and that, from what I understand, is supposed to be exclusively for these factories to produce these high fuel-efficient vehicles. When they were in Washington just yesterday, they're pleading with Congress and Pelosi for this second $25 billion loan, which perhaps would help bolster liquidity and free up some of that cash to pay for maybe some of these health packages, the pension packages. One question I got from workers early this morning when they were getting in at their 6 o'clock shift change is those who still work here, what about their current health insurance situation? Will the company continue to match the 401k? I know there are some college tuition reimbursement programs. So what about for the current workers? If one of these, if these losses continue to tank, what about the folks who are in this plant today?
That's a good question, because we don't know, and I know that there are union agreements, and I'm sure they're going to be sitting down trying to figure it out, because the union doesn't want the manufacturer to go out of business because there's jobs that are being affected. So there may have to be some negotiations on both sides where the union may have to give up some things. Maybe it's the 401k matching plan. Maybe it's some other benefits. And in exchange, they're going to have to do something on the automotive end, but there's absolutely going to have to be some paring down of some of these huge expenditures that are out there. I mean, when you look at the automotive aftermarket, and this is what I'm doing here in Vegas, we are coming up with ways to try and help consumers. They need to move quicker, and that is the problem. The automotive industry just moves so slow like molasses in January.
Wow. All right, Brooke, let me fire one more, and then if we have time, we'll get back to you for one more question. So, Lauren, look, I'm a 40-year-old auto worker here, and I'm working the line here, and I'm hearing about all these cuts. What is my mindset today? Should I retrain? Should I think about becoming a nurse or something?
Well, you know, I honestly, if it were me, I would want my job to continue and do what I can, but when you're on the line, you don't really have much say in what the corporation is doing. So if it were me, I would probably look at some other angles. You know, always have a backup plan. As I was always told as a kid, try to have multiple income streams. Try to come up with what the ways. I believe there's a book called Who Moved the Cheese? Yeah. The cheese has moved. We have to move with it. If that means making more fuel-efficient vehicles, if that means that you have to start retraining yourself, I mean, I have to do that every day, just like you have to do. We have to be on our toes. And unfortunately, we tend to be a very comfortable society. We're going to have to look at some other avenues. There's going to be a lot of people in unemployment. They're going to have to look for a lot of other opportunities. Wow. All right, Lauren Fix, that was awesome. Boy, a tough story to cover in your sector right now, but you do a great job of it. All right, Lauren, appreciate it. Thank you.